43Y for 3 years. I sat across from my boyfriend at family dinners and heard him talk about his sister. Her name was Imani. She lived out of state. Austin, he always said, for work. She was younger than him by 2 years, funny and creative, the kind of person you wanted to meet. He told me stories about her all the time. Her sense of humor. Her laugh. The trip they had taken together as children. The way she still called him by the nickname their grandmother had given him. I had never met her in person. But I felt like I knew her, which was perhaps the point. He brought her up often enough that her name became part of the background of my life. She sent him memes. She called on Sunday evenings, usually when I was in the bath or in another room. He bought her birthday gifts with the kind of attention that told you he was thinking about it long before he walked into a shop. His name was Darius. We had been together for 3 years and 4 months. I had been in love with him for most of that time. I had believed in him completely. That was the version of my life that ended one evening in September when he fell asleep on the sofa with his phone still unlocked and a message on the screen that read, "Can't wait until she leaves for work again. Miss you, baby." Those words were not from a sister. I did not wake him. I stood very still in the middle of our living room with his phone in my hand, and I read the message one more time. Then I put the phone face down on the coffee table, exactly where it had been, and I went to the bathroom and turned on the shower and sat on the edge of the tub and let the noise of the water fill the room. I sat there for a long time. My name is Zola. I am 31 years old. I have a career I worked hard for, friends I trust, and a sense of myself that took years to develop and that I had, until that moment, believed was solid. I will not pretend the next hour was dignified. I cried very quietly, not wanting Darius to wake up and find me there, which tells you something about where my instincts still were even in the middle of discovering that the life I had been building with someone was less than it appeared. But at some point the crying stopped. And what came after the crying was something I had not expected. Clarity. Not the clarity of understanding everything. I did not yet understand everything. But the specific clarity of someone who has been given a piece of information they cannot unknow and who now has to decide, with total honesty, what they are going to do with it. I turned off the shower. I dried my face. I went back to the living room. Darius was still sleeping. I sat in the chair across from him and I began to think. I did not confront him that night. I had considered it. Standing over him while he slept, waking him and putting the phone in his face and watching him construct a lie in real time. Part of me had wanted that, the immediate confrontation, the raw scene. But I knew Darius. I had spent 3 years and 4 months learning how he operated. He was a skilled manager of situations. He was charming under pressure. He had a way of shifting the frame of any argument so quickly that you could end up apologizing for the manner in which you raised a legitimate concern about something he had actually done. If I confronted him that night, without evidence, without preparation, without knowing anything beyond one message, I would lose. Not because I was wrong, because he was better equipped for that kind of fight than I was. I needed more. And I needed time. And I needed to be very, very calm. I went to bed. I said good night to him when he woke briefly and shuffled to the bedroom. I lay beside him in the dark and listened to him breathe and thought about everything I had missed and everything I was going to find. The next morning I made coffee and asked how he had slept and whether Imani had called recently. He said she had called yesterday. He missed her. He was hoping she might visit soon. That would be great, I said. I'd love to finally meet her. He smiled and agreed. Smiled back. The investigation had begun. I started carefully and I started small. The day after finding the message, I created a fake Instagram account. Nothing dramatic. A simple profile with a few reposted images and a generic name that would not trigger suspicion. I spent an afternoon searching for Imani. He had mentioned her last name once, during a story about a childhood vacation. I had not realized at the time that I was filing it away. But I was the kind of person who filed things away without knowing why, and now I knew why. I found her account within 20 minutes. It was public. I sat at my desk at work during my lunch break with my headphones in and my actual phone on silent, and I scrolled through her feed with a specific focus of someone looking for a pattern rather than a single piece of evidence. The pattern was not hard to find. She was beautiful. That was the first thing I noticed, and I notice it here because I think it matters to be honest about the full texture of what discovering something like this actually feels like. She was beautiful, and she had the particular quality of someone who was confident in their beauty, which is different and more affecting. The second thing I noticed was the photographs. Couples' vacations. Candlelit dinners. New Year's Eve. A set of photographs from what looked like a beach trip that I could not place on any timeline Darius had offered me. The captions were careful. Careful in the specific way of someone managing an audience. But they were not careful enough. I spent a week gathering. Not confronting. Not reacting. Gathering quietly and systematically, in the way that people gather when they have decided that the evidence matters more than the emotion. I found the hotel receipt in his car on a Tuesday afternoon. I had gone to retrieve a jacket I had left on the back seat. I was not looking for anything. The receipt was in the door compartment, not hidden, just there. The way things end up when you think you are alone in your own life and do not bother to manage the small details. The date on the receipt was the same weekend Darius had told me he was visiting Imani because she was sick and needed someone there. 2 nights. 1 room. A hotel about 40 miles outside the city, the kind of place chosen specifically for distance rather than convenience. I took a photograph of the receipt on my phone. I put it back exactly where I had found it. Then I collected my jacket and went back inside and started dinner and asked Darius about his day when he came home. He said his day was fine. Bit busy. He was tired. I said I was sorry he was tired. I asked if Imani was feeling better after the weekend. He said yes, much better. She had needed company and he was glad he went. I said that was good. I was glad she had him. He kissed me on the cheek. I continued making dinner. The photograph of the receipt was on my phone in my pocket. I reached out to Imani in the second week. Not as myself. I used the fake account I had created and sent her a message that was carefully constructed to sound like someone from her workplace. A mutual colleague, a professional contact. Not trying to trap her. Trying to understand the shape of what I was actually dealing with. She did not respond. I sat with that for a few days and then I tried a different approach. I found her Facebook, which was more locked down than her Instagram but had one piece of information that the Instagram did not. A town she had grown up in. Which happened to be the same town Darius had grown up in. They had known each other since childhood. Or at least they had grown up in the same place, which was not quite the same thing but was something. I spent an evening building the full picture. Childhood. High school probably or nearby. Then both of them in this city, where she had at some point arrived and where I was now relatively certain she had not left for Austin. She was here. She had always been here. There was no out-of-state Imani. There was a woman named Imani who lived in this city, whom Darius had been seeing for at least as long as he had been with me, possibly longer, and who he had been presenting to me as his sister for 3 years and 4 months. I sat with that information for 1 full evening. Then I wrote Imani a direct message. As myself. I will tell you exactly what I wrote. I wrote, "My name is Zola. I have been with Darius for over 3 years. I believe you have been seeing him during that time. I am not writing to accuse you of anything. I am writing because I think you deserve to know the same things I deserve to know. If I am wrong, please ignore this message. If I am not wrong, I think we should talk." Then I sent it and I put my phone in a drawer and went for a walk. I was gone for 45 minutes. When I came back, I opened the drawer and looked at my phone. She had replied. The message was short. It said, "I think we should talk too." He told me he was single. I read that sentence 3 times. He told me he was single. She had not known about me. She was not a willing participant in a deception designed to hurt me. She was another person who had been lied to, in a different configuration of the same lie. She had believed she was in an exclusive relationship with a single man. He had been telling her he was single for the same 3 years and 4 months he had been telling me she was his sister. I thought about Darius, charming and skilled and effortlessly managing 2 realities in parallel, and I felt something I had not expected to feel at this moment. Not just anger at him. Sympathy for her. We met in person 4 days later. A coffee shop on the north side of the city that neither of us usually went to. Neutral ground, which we had agreed on without needing to say why. I arrived first. I ordered a tea because my hands were slightly unsteady and I thought coffee might make that worse. I sat at a table near the window and waited. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately from the photographs. She was exactly as she appeared in them, which was something, the way certain people are consistently themselves across the distance of a screen. She sat down. We looked at each other for a moment. Then she said, "He said his girlfriend's name was Zola." "That's me," I said. "He said you were barely together anymore. That things had been over in everything but name for a long time. That he was trying to figure out how to end it properly." I absorbed that. "He has said nothing to me that would suggest any of that," I said. She looked out the window. She had the expression of someone who had been sitting with something difficult for 4 days and had arrived at the meeting already exhausted by the weight of it. "I feel sick," she said. "Yes," I said. "I know the feeling." We sat for a while with our drinks. Then she asked how long I had known. I told her. She told me her version. We talked for 2 hours and by the end of it I had a complete picture and so did she. Imani's version of 3 years looked nothing like mine. She had met Darius at a professional event about 4 years ago. They had dated for 6 months before it became, in her understanding, exclusive. He had told her he was single. He had been consistent about it. He had introduced her to his friends, some of whom I now realized I had never met. He had kept his 2 worlds very precisely separated. When I had come into the picture, he had told her I was an ex who was going through a difficult time and who he was supporting as a friend. Over time the story had shifted. We were working on a project together, we were neighbors, we were close friends who spent time together but nothing more. She had believed him because she had no reason not to. Because the specific skill of someone living a double life is the construction of narratives that are internally consistent and delivered with the ease of truth. She had suspected something was wrong several times over the years. He always had an explanation. He was good at explanations. Sitting across from me in that coffee shop, she went through the full timeline out loud, as if hearing it in her own voice made it real in a way that thinking it had not. "He told me he wanted to introduce me to his sister at some point," she said. I looked at her. "He told me the same thing," I said. "About you. Except he said you were the sister." She stared at me. Then she said very quietly, "He put me in the story too." We agreed to meet again the following week. Not to plan anything, not yet. Simply to give each other time to process what had been shared between us and to see what we wanted to do with it. I drove home from the coffee shop and sat in my car outside our building for a while before going in. Darius's car was there. He would be inside. We would have dinner and watch something and go to bed, and he would have no idea that the 2 women he had been lying to for 3 years had spent the afternoon in a coffee shop on the north side of the city comparing stories. I went inside. He was making pasta. He kissed me hello. He asked about my day. I told him it had been good. I had met a friend for coffee. I was tired but fine. He said he was glad. He said he had spoken to Imani today, she had called, and she sounded good. Better than last week. I said that was nice to hear. He put dinner on the table and I sat across from him and ate pasta and asked about his work and laughed at something he said, and all the time I was sitting across from him I was thinking about the woman in the coffee shop who had said he put me in the story too. He had built a version of each of us into the lie he told the other. I was her story. She was mine. And he had been managing both of us with the confidence of someone who had never once imagined we might speak to each other. Imani and I met 3 more times before we made any decision about what to do. I think this is important to say because the story I am telling could easily be misread as a story about revenge. It was not only that. It was also, and perhaps mostly, a story about 2 women sitting with something enormous and figuring out what the right thing to do with it was. We were angry. That was real and it was not nothing. But we were also sad. And confused. And, in Imani's case particularly, grieving something she had genuinely believed in. She had loved him. She told me this plainly and without embarrassment, which I admired. She had believed they had a future. She had passed up other opportunities because she was committed to this. She had introduced him to people in her life as someone she was serious about. And I had been in the background of all of it, with my pasta dinners and my Sunday evenings and my conversations about the sister I had never met. I had also loved him. I want to say that clearly too, because it changes the texture of everything that followed. This was not a story about discovering that someone I had never cared about had deceived me. This was a story about the specific, particular grief of finding out that the life you believed you were living was a performance conducted for your benefit while the actual story ran parallel to it. We both sat with that. And eventually we decided together what came next. Darius was turning 30 in November. He had mentioned the birthday several times over the course of the year, not in a demanding way, but in the way of someone who considers a milestone birthday significant and is hoping it will be marked properly. He was looking forward to it. He had mentioned wanting to do something with the people he loved. I had been quietly planning a party for months. Not the party I ended up throwing. A genuine celebration that I had been organizing out of love. Guest list, venue, catering. A slideshow I had been building from photographs. When Imani and I decided what we were going to do, the birthday party became something else entirely. I did not cancel the planning. I continued it. I confirmed the venue, a private function room at a restaurant downtown. I continued the guest list. I added people he had not expected, including several of his friends from the side of his life that I had never been introduced to. Imani helped with that list. She knew who they were. I added Imani to the guest list. I told Darius the party was coming along beautifully, that it was going to be a surprise and he was not to ask questions. He was delighted. He said I was the best. He kissed me and said he did not deserve me. He said that without irony. I agreed with him inside my head and said thank you out loud. The 2 weeks before the birthday party were the most disciplined of my life. I maintained everything. Every dinner, every conversation, every bedtime routine, every Sunday morning coffee. I smiled at the right moments. I asked about Imani with the interest of a devoted girlfriend who genuinely wanted her boyfriend's sister to visit soon. He took her to dinner on a Wednesday evening. He told me he was working late. I tracked it in a way I am not proud of. Not through his phone this time, but through a photograph she posted that evening that had a restaurant I recognized in the background. Not something she had planned. Just the natural behavior of someone living her actual life. I screenshotted it. I added it to the folder on my phone. My friend Edaora was the only person I had told. She knew everything. She had held my hand through the coffee shop meetings with Imani and through the planning and through the long evenings when I had gone home to Darius and smiled and eaten dinner and felt the particular exhaustion of performing normalcy. She asked me the week before the party if I was sure. I told her I was sure. She asked what I was hoping to feel afterward. I thought about it honestly. I want him to understand that we talked, I said. That's all. I want him to understand that he underestimated both of us. Edaora nodded. He definitely underestimated you, she said. The party was on a Saturday in November. The venue was decorated simply and well. 42 people were invited. Most of them arrived before Darius. I had told him that Edaora was taking him out for a birthday drink and that I would meet them later. A misdirection that gave me time to be at the venue before him and to make sure everything was in place. Imani arrived at 7:15. 15 minutes before Darius was due. She was composed in the way of someone who has had 2 weeks to prepare for a difficult thing and has done the preparation thoroughly. She was wearing a dark green dress and she had the expression of a person who had decided exactly what they were going to do and was not going to let nerves stop them. I met her at the door. We had not seen each other in 10 days. We stood for a moment and I thought about the coffee shop on the north side of the city and the 2 hours we had spent exchanging versions of the same life. Are you ready? She asked. Yes, I said. How do you feel? Calm, I said. And I meant it. The anger that had been building for 6 weeks had settled into something colder and cleaner. Not fury. Clarity. We went inside together. The room was full of people who had no idea what was about to happen. I looked around at the familiar and unfamiliar faces and I thought, he built 2 worlds and tonight they are in the same room. Then Edaora sent me a text. 5 minutes away. Darius walked in at 7:32. He came through the door with Adiora behind him, already smiling before he had fully registered the room. Then he registered the room and the smile became something wider and more genuine, the smile of a person who has just understood that more effort has been made for them than they expected. He looked around. He saw people he knew. He looked for me. I was standing at the far end of the room with a glass in my hand and a small smile. A wave. He crossed to me and hugged me and said he could not believe it and thanked me. He said I was incredible. He said he loved me. I said happy birthday. He began working the room. This was his particular skill, moving through a space and making every person feel like they were the one he had most wanted to see. I watched him do it. Then he reached the group on the left side of the room. Imani was standing with two of his friends from her side of his life, people he had introduced her to, people who knew them as a couple, who did not know me at all. He saw her. The movement of his face in that moment was something I will remember for a long time. It did not go through stages like the stories say. It went very still, completely still. The smile did not fall off exactly, simply stopped being connected to anything. He looked at her. Then he looked at me. I raised my glass slightly. He looked back at Imani. I gave him 30 seconds. 30 seconds to calculate, to look between us, to understand what the presence of both of us in the same room, at the same party meant. I watched him do the calculation. I could see it happening behind his eyes. He was looking for an exit, a narrative, an explanation that would account for this that he could deploy before it became what it was becoming. There was no narrative. He had told Imani I was his girlfriend. He had told me she was his sister. They could not both be true and both of us knew it, and now we were both in the room. I walked to the front of the room and picked up the small wireless microphone we had arranged earlier. The room quieted, expecting a toast. I said, "Before we do anything else tonight, I want to say something. 3 years ago I met Darius and fell in love with him. He told me early on that he had a younger sister named Imani who lived out of state. I never met her. She was always somewhere else. But I heard about her constantly. She was generous and funny and he clearly cared about her very much." The room was fully quiet now. Not the good quiet of attention. Different kind. I said, "A few months ago I started to wonder about Imani. And a few weeks ago I met her. In person. At a coffee shop on the north side of the city. I looked at Darius. She and I had a very interesting conversation. The room was completely silent." Continued. "Imani told me that she had been in a relationship with Darius for nearly 4 years. She told me that he had told her he was single. She told me that in his version of events, I was an ex-girlfriend he was helping through a difficult time. Just a friend." Pause. "In my version of events, she was his sister." Someone in the room made a small involuntary sound. Someone else said something under their breath. Darius had not moved. He was standing with a drink he had picked up somewhere in the last 30 seconds and he was not drinking it. He was looking at me with the expression of someone who has arrived at the moment of maximum exposure and is trying to decide whether there is still a way out. There was not. "He built 2 stories," I said. "One for each of us. And he was careful enough that those stories never crossed. We never met. We never talked. We had no reason to." I looked at Imani across the room. She was watching me steadily. "He made one mistake," I said. "He fell asleep with his phone unlocked." I set the microphone down. "I'm not going to say anything else about it," I said. "This is still his birthday. I did organize a very good party. There is excellent food. I hope everyone has a nice evening." I walked to where Imani was standing. I stood beside her. We both looked at Darius. His face went through something in those seconds that I cannot fully describe. Denial first. The expression of someone looking for a version of events that could still be managed. The calculation I had watched him do when he first saw Imani was now running openly, not hidden, and it was reaching the same answer every time it ran. Then something that was not quite anger but contained anger. The expression of a person who has been caught but whose instinct is to direct the exposure outward. To find a way in which the people who had done the catching were the ones who had done something wrong. He said, "This is not," he stopped. Started again. "You had no right to involve her in. She messaged me first," Imani said. Her voice was very calm. "When she found out about me. You shouldn't have." "We compared notes," I said. "It turns out your stories had a lot of consistent details. You're a very organized liar." Someone near the back of the room laughed briefly and then stopped themselves. 42 people were watching this, and most of them were now understanding the full shape of what they were watching. The friends from Imani's side of his life had the particular expression of people who had suspected something for a while and were watching their suspicion confirmed. The friends from my side looked simply shocked. His best friend, a man named Theo, was standing near the door. He caught my eye. He looked at Darius. He looked back at me. He shook his head once, slowly. That said everything. I left the party at 9:30. Not dramatically. Not with a speech. I had said what I needed to say, and it had been heard, and I was not interested in extending the scene beyond what it needed to be. I kissed Adora on the cheek. I hugged Imani briefly, and she hugged me back, and we held on for a second longer than I expected. Then I collected my coat and I walked out. Darius followed me into the lobby. He called my name. Turn. He looked, for the first time in the 4 years I had known him, genuinely without an angle. All the angles had been used up in the last 90 minutes, and what was left was a man standing in a hotel lobby at his own birthday party, having just had his life correctly described in front of 42 people. He said he was sorry. I said I knew. He said he had made a terrible mistake. I said he had made many of them and they had been consistent and deliberate over a very long period of time, which was different from a mistake. He said he did not know what to say. I told him that was fine. I told him I did not need him to say anything more. I told him I had said what I needed to say and I was now going to go home, and he was welcome to go back to his party. Then I walked out of the lobby and into the night. The air was cold and clear and I breathed it in. I went to Adora's that night. She had stayed at the party until it wound down, and she told me afterward what had happened after I left, which I had not asked for and was mildly grateful to receive. The party had mostly continued. People ate and drank, and gradually the energy of the room settled into something more normal, though the conversations were different from what they would have been without the previous hour. Several people had left early. Several more had spoken to either Imani or to friends of mine, trying to piece together what they had witnessed. Darius had gone back inside. He had not stayed long. Theo had driven him home. Imani had stayed for another hour and left with the friends from her side of his life, who it turned out had known something was not quite right for some time but had not had the full picture. At Adora's I ate a bowl of cereal because I had not been able to eat much at the party, and I sat on her sofa in the lamplight, and she did not make me talk if I did not want to. After a while I said, "I feel lighter." She said, "Good." "Not happy," I said. "Not yet. But lighter." "That's the right order," she said. I thought about Darius in a hotel lobby looking genuinely lost for the first time. I thought about Imani hugging me at the door. I thought about 3 years and 4 months of pasta dinners and Sunday evenings and a sister who had never existed. I thought he thought I did not know. That had been his biggest mistake. The weeks after the party were strange in the particular way that follows an ending. Darius called several times in the first week. I answered twice. Both conversations were brief. He said the things people say when they have been exposed. Explanations that were really justifications. Apologies that contained within them the implicit suggestion that the extent of his wrongdoing had been overstated. I was not angry during those calls. I was past anger by then. I told him clearly that the relationship was over, and that I did not need a further conversation to arrive at that conclusion. He seemed genuinely to have believed that the party would be the crisis and that there would be a recovery after the crisis, which tells you something about the particular kind of confidence that allows a person to maintain a deception for years. I did not block his number. I simply stopped answering. My apartment. I had moved into my own place before the party, which I had done quietly over the previous 2 weeks in preparation, Felt like the clearest space I had lived in for a long time. I had been worried that leaving would feel like loss. What it felt like instead was the specific relief of someone who has been carrying something heavy for too long and has finally been given permission to put it down. I bought a plant for the kitchen windowsill. I arranged my books the way I had always wanted to arrange them. I slept in the center of the bed. Small things. But daily life is made of small things. Imani and I were not best friends after the party. I want to be honest about that because I think it would be a neater story if we were. If the two women who had been deceived by the same man had emerged from it as immediate and permanent allies, meeting for brunch every week and building a friendship from the wreckage of a shared betrayal. We met for coffee twice more in the months that followed. The first time was about 3 weeks after the party, when the adrenaline of it had settled and we were both living with the quieter aftermath. The second time was in February, when Imani had started seeing someone new and wanted to tell someone who would understand the particular courage that required. We texted occasionally. She checked in when she heard through a mutual connection that I had moved. I sent her a message when I saw she had posted a photograph that looked genuinely happy. We were not best friends. But we were something. Something that did not have a clean name but that was real. She had been deceived in a different configuration of the same lie. We had both been given a role in a story we had not auditioned for. We had both found out. We had both decided together what to do about it. That was a specific kind of bond. Not a friendship born from love. A friendship born from the particular mutual respect of two people who had been through something together, and had handled it with more dignity than was required. 6 months after the party, a video appeared online. I had not known anyone had recorded it. Someone at the party had filmed a portion of the speech on their phone and had, after some time had passed, decided to share it on a social media platform with a caption that I will not reproduce here but that described the situation with accuracy. It was viewed a significant number of times. I received messages from people I had not spoken to in years and from strangers who had found me through the various paths that social media creates for these things. I did not seek any of that attention. I want to be clear about that because I am aware of how easily a story like this becomes something performed rather than something lived. What I did at the party I did for myself and for Imani and for the specific need to have the truth exist in a room where Darius was present. I did not think about who might be recording. I am not sure how I feel about the video. Some of the messages I received were from people who had been in similar situations and who said watching it had made them feel less alone. That part mattered to me. The attention itself did not. What I feel most clearly when I think about the party and everything that followed is not triumph. It is the satisfaction of a thing having been done correctly. Of truth having been said in the right room at the right moment. That is what I had wanted. And that is what I got. Darius did not lose his job. I want to correct that version of the story if it exists anywhere, because I prefer accuracy to narrative convenience. He faced some social consequences. Several friends distanced themselves. His professional reputation in certain circles was affected. The particular social capital that comes from being well-liked and trusted took a significant hit. But he did not lose his job. He was not publicly destroyed. He continued his life. I find I am able to sit with that without a great deal of distress. Not because what he did was acceptable. It was not. But because I had never needed his destruction to feel that justice had been served. I had needed him to understand that he had been seen, fully and clearly, by both of the women he had been deceiving at the same time in the same room. That had happened. Whether he had fully absorbed it or had, as I suspected, moved through the consequences with the same skilled management he had always applied to difficult situations. I could not know. I would not know. He was not part of my life anymore, and what he did with the aftermath was not my concern. I thought about him sometimes in the way you think about a chapter that has been fully read. Not with longing. With the particular distance of someone who has closed a book and understands it was never the story they thought it was. The story I was actually living was the one that came after. And that story was entirely mine. It has been 9 months since the birthday party. I am in my apartment with a kitchen plant, which has grown significantly and which I take as a reliable sign of something. I have been sleeping in the center of the bed this whole time and I have started to understand it as a natural state rather than a statement. Imani sent me a message last week. She had gone on a weekend trip with the man she has been seeing since February. She said it had been good. She said she felt, for the first time in a long time, like herself. I replied that I was glad. I meant it without complication. Eduora and I have dinner most Thursday evenings. She has not once made me feel that what I did at the party requires ongoing analysis or justification. She was there. She understood it. We have moved on to other subjects, which is exactly what moving on looks like. I think sometimes about the woman I was in the living room with the phone in her hand. Choosing not to wake him. Choosing to think before acting. Choosing patience over the immediate relief of confrontation. That choice had cost something. Weeks of sitting across dinner tables from someone who did not know I knew. Weeks of asking about a sister who was not a sister. The specific exhaustion of performing normalcy inside a truth that was anything but normal. But it had bought something too. The room full of people. Imani in her dark green dress. The right words said at the right time to the right person. He thought I did not know the truth. That was, in the end, exactly the mistake I needed him to make.